Hey, this is Caleb with Paris Painting. I'm on here with another episode with Nate Streeter from Aleph Ventures, and today we want to talk about just marketing overall, what to do in the off season, how we can plan ahead. We might take a look at some websites, start thinking about some of these things that you typically don't think about in the busy season. So, yeah, I don't know if Nate, you want to say something else, but I think that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that you could tackle in the off season that you should, and for smaller painting businesses, it's like there's some really quick and dirty little things that I think we could kind of share that, we think about in the off season that I think they should
Yeah.
be too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to start looking at, I know you're particularly interested in websites and like making updates to websites and some of the partners, some of that stuff. What's kind of the biggest struggle with the partners right now, you think, for websites, and what's working, what's not working?
I mean, even before we get into that, there's a couple practical things that I probably would recommend that are just like simple things you should do in the off season. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, like your phone system. I think we were going through that with a bunch of different partners.
Mm,
The best time of the year, if you're thinking about switching to a real phone system, so you're thinking about switching to like an open phone or something like that, I would say, yeah, November, December, January is the best time because your volume's way down. So you can
mm,
sort of afford if you had a couple hours where your phone system wasn't quite working. But this is definitely something I would recommend for painting companies, like especially if you're just still on like a single cell phone
yeah.
or a couple cell phones. It's like if you're getting up to $1 million plus, that's going to be painful. And you need to now's as good a time as any to switch. It's not very expensive. It's something you could do, in the off season. And like we've talked about, those kind of tools are probably good up to like a 15 or $20 million business. So you could start using a tool that you're going to probably use for years to come.
Yep.
All right. I think that'd be one thing that I would think of immediately. And then we've talked about this, like turn off a bunch of your marketing. I know that sounds terrible because you're really slow, but
Yeah.
you're slow because the demand is down. Um, and things like Facebook ads don't work as well in November and December. So then they get very expensive, right, as we get into the holiday season. Um, Direct mail and flyers don't work quite as well this time of year
Yeah.
either.
Yep.
Door knocking doesn't work quite as well. We don't have as much volume in PPC. Um, yard signs are okay, but our numbers tend to go way down for those too. So their lead aggregators aren't as great, right? Because a lot of painters are rushing into those tools, so they're just not as good this time of year either. So it's
Yeah.
sort of an irony. It's like everything is harder. So I know for many of our partners, including Paris, we tend to focus on reactivation, try
Hmm.
to focus on, you've already got a bunch that you've brought in as far as leads, as far as, open estimates, as far as lost estimates, like go after those. And then for like paid advertising, we're a lot of times spending money to go after people who've already been to our website,
Yeah.
who've already shown interest in our products or services in some way, shape, or form, right? And then we'll really just pick up advertising, like in the way we traditionally think about it, in earnest. Like we're doing some, but we'll really pick up in earnest, like maybe the second or third week of January.
Hmm. Yeah. I think the sentiment overall is like if they haven't contacted us, or if they haven't even been to our website or responded to anything, it's probably not a great. They're probably not going to respond. That's kind of how I feel. That could be a wrong assumption, but we've done a ton of mail. We've done a ton of retargeting with website visitors. We're seeing all those numbers drop. Our conversions are $300 to $400. I think interior even this week was up to $500 a conversion for retargeting, and it's typically like 150 for us. So it was a huge drop. But yeah, I think it's a great time to start messing around with some of your systems and potentially break a few things.
Yeah.
At Paris, we're switching to open phone, and yeah, we're trying to organize all of our phone numbers, all of our call tracking numbers. I did an audit of those, like getting everything prepared in the back end so that it'll be a successful year next year is more important than getting a couple leads in my mind. Like, I think it's a good time to actually improve your systems, not just like try to fight for a few more appointments. It feels like a good time to start strategically planning for next year.
Yeah, and quite frankly, if you don't have enough leads this week, which I know lots of you are having trouble with that, I hate to just tell you this, but there's probably not a lot you can do this week that are going to affect your
Exactly.
sales this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, you've already sort of made your bet a little bit, and the answer to your problem came 8 or 10 weeks ago,
Mhm.
unfortunately, right? So
Yeah.
those of you guys who are contacting me, like, what should I be doing this week? It's like, what you should have been doing was back in August and September. I hate to just say it like that, but
Yeah. It's true.
um, and for those that we aren't hitting the ball out of the park right now, that's part of what we're analyzing is what do we do wrong in August,
Yeah.
September, and October, right? Is we're not trying to figure out how to create a miracle. Do you remember 2 years ago, Caleb, when we were trying to create miracles and we did a lot of door knocking this time of year? Do you remember right off the top of your head, kind of like broadly the results of those efforts? Because I know we've talked about it a couple times as not being super great.
Yeah, I can pull it up too, but I believe, um, so like to your point, it was over 50% of the revenue that we estimated in Q4 from door knocking was produced, like sold and produced like the next year. And I think for exteriors, it was a very small, it was like 15 or 20%. So like it didn't help our exterior production goal at all. Like even though we sold hundreds and hundreds of thousands, we only produced like 50K of it or something like that. So it was actually a good like kind of like get ahead of next year, but it was a terrible last minute shot. So that's the thing I think with canvassing is like there's no such thing as a quick turnaround. Like you can produce some of them, but the percentage won't be, you know, it won't be super high.
It's a good way to think about this. I heard your sales team talking about it yesterday at Paris because I was in your meeting. Um, and they were talking about a lot of the leads they're getting this time of the year, like the organic leads are people who like have a last minute small project, or they just tend to be not these big robust projects, right? Like
Yeah.
there isn't as much of that happening this time of year. Um, and that's a good litmus test. Like if you're wondering what kind of projects you can go get with marketing dollars, just look at what you're getting for a repeat referral. That's a good indicator of probably what's out there in the market. And if
Mm.
you're like, well, everything I'm getting is small and da da da, it's like, well, if you do more marketing, that's likely what you're going to go get too, or it's showing you the demand, right? That's all I'm
Yeah.
just trying to say. Now you could buck that and you could say, well, I'm not getting X and I'm going to go try to get Y. Um, but I guarantee you it's going to probably be expensive if you try to buck the trend,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So, yeah, that's great, man. So I know you're so eager to talk about websites. Let's talk about them. Obviously I'm always wanting to talk about those too. Walk me through what you're thinking about. Like, what are the changes you'd like to see? You have a little more time. We can work on some of these kind of projects. What should we be doing to our websites right now?
Yeah. Something that is, I mean, super easy to look at. If you look into your Google Ads, or you can just chat GPT, look up like what are the top searches from this year and what I know particularly like I think pricing is just a huge question that every painting company could do a better job answering, and we're seeing that across some of the more professional industries. So I think the questions like is your website answering the common questions and building all your content around that, and we're keeping track of the questions we get, and we're building an internal resource library for our sales support so that obviously the person who's answering the phone has the answer to even the technical questions. But I think building a website, we want to revamp the homepage, of course, like our hero banner. We want to revamp a lot of it, but we're also trying to diversify our traffic across landing pages that are more niche and more customized to the search. So I think in Google Ads, like we're seeing a lot of clicks from cost to paint an interior room, or so I think building those pages around the common searches is what we were trying to do, specifically around pricing.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I'm just looking at this. I can see on your webpage, on Paris Painting's homepage. Maybe you could pull it up. Let's talk through it a little bit.
yeah,
Because I have lots of thoughts. I'm always an expert in my opinions, and Caleb probably drive him crazy. But I think I see that you guys have changed the headline for a seasonal headline.
yeah, yeah. We just did like paint your home. We did like paint your exterior before winter. We just changed it. Yeah, honestly, I know it's not. It doesn't follow all of the things, but I think it has a good job of like some of the content of the people that and the projects that we're trying to do. So
I
think
think, I mean, one thing that I would say, if you always take my test that I always recommend, which is take the words off and then what does it communicate? And if it doesn't communicate the main headline, then you probably either need to change the headline or need to change the primary picture. And in this case, I think that's true. Paint before the holidays, like these people don't look like they're probably painting before the holidays. It doesn't have anything to do with the holidays.
yeah,
You need to have, it would be better to have a picture of somebody in their house in a living room with a Christmas tree. That would be
yeah,
ideal,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Now, conveying the idea of painting is very difficult, right? Like, because it's messy. Like, let's be honest, like all the pictures that actually are showing painting are kind of messy. But that would be ideal for this picture if you were trying
oh yeah,
to do it. By the way, the reason that our webpage for Paris is scoring a little bit low on some of the indexes is because this truth index takes a fair amount of time to load. I don't know if you noticed that, but that's why we're scoring lower. You guys probably get this too, where you have these vendors send you these scores. A couple times a year, they're like, "Oh, we can improve 8,000 things on your website. You guys are terrible. Trust us." Yeah, we get all those too. The reason this one's not scoring quite as high is because this trust index, it takes a little bit to load,
yeah,
and every millisecond is sort of like takes your website down a lot of notches in those scoring seasons.
mm-hmm.
What about this paint before the holidays? If you scroll down below that, what are you trying to convey here? Full interior, exterior, EPA LED.
Yeah. This was kind of sloppy because I had it. It made more sense when it was paint your exterior because all these are exterior photos and we don't have any great homeowner interior photos that we have some, but the homeowner doesn't want us to use interior. So
It's tough.
yeah, this was like really sloppy because I changed the paint your exterior before winter and then it snowed. So then I quick changed it. So it was a very sloppy change, but yeah.
But these are all things that you can make little changes for the seasons, and I would recommend, if you guys haven't already, build your website in something like Elementor or something really simple like that because it's relatively easy. Like Caleb, you're going in and making changes on your team. You're not hiring someone to make these changes.
Sometimes we hire someone, but
Okay.
yeah, if it's headlines and stuff, or FAQs, I just change it quick.
Yep. But you want to have something simple enough to do that. And if you use a tool like Elementor and WordPress, it's fairly easy. And
Yeah.
then there's also a million people you could hire just to make those quick changes. If you're feeling really like you have to hire a very specific company to work on your website, I sort of hate that for you. Like if you're a painting company, like a lot of you come to me and you've got this very specific company that built the website and only they can work on it.
Yeah.
Like if we have a partner and that's the situation, the first thing we do immediately is rebuild their website as a WordPress site with Elementor. Like it's, we spend $400 to $800 usually to do that. Well, I think sometimes as low as $300 to do that.
Yeah.
So just to make the exact same website that they have now, like not to make big upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Exactly.
But that's why he's like, I don't want to mess around with having to have a single vendor that I'm very dependent on. That's not great. Right.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping to do in the off season is build a staging site and then rebuild our homepage. But it's so easy to have other people come in and like mess around with the staging page. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm hoping for in the off season here is to just really mess around with it and improve it overall. But
What did you, there was another site that you were really enamored with when we went to the Live 500 show last week, or a company and their website. Can you bring that up and let's walk through what they're doing there? Because they're quite a bit bigger company, right?
yeah, I think they're a couple 100 million maybe.
Okay.
Um, I mean, there's a lot going on, but I do like some of I think website, you're trying to get people, like to increase the dwell time, how long people are on the website. Um, and I like what they're doing with pricing specifically. Um, they give really transparent pricing on everything. And then they kind of walk through what's going into it. It has just a lot of, their website is just like full of information. They have a learning center. I kind of like that more than a blog. Because blogs
Yeah,
kind
no
of,
one's gonna,
they kind of
no one
suck.
cares. Yeah, no one
But
cares.
their YouTube videos, like they still get, 1,000 views or so. But they do all sorts of these quick training videos. I know they spend a lot on content, but they have just a lot of pretty helpful things, I think.
Those two words we use all the time, right? Surprisingly helpful.
Yep.
Remember, the elephant in the room is that home service businesses aren't trustworthy. Whatever price they give you is not the price it's going to be at the end. Whatever timeline they give you, it's not going to be that timeline.
Yeah.
There's a good chance they're going to ghost you. They don't care about you. They don't care about your house. Like, this is like what you're working against, right? And so when you build a website or you build any tool, I think you have to always have that in mind. Here, go back to their homepage a little bit because I wanna point something out. So again, we take all the words off and we just look at the pictures. Okay, so what do I see? I see a couple that clearly could live in San Antonio, so that like makes sense. They're
Yeah.
clearly wealthy. Like, here's how I could tell that is because not only is their house beautiful in the background, but she's got quite a bit of jewelry on. He's got a very fancy watch, right? Like, these are things that, you and I probably don't really care about because we're not
Yeah.
chasing the Joneses, right? But like the average person who buys from you, these are all the little signals to like who do you sell to, right? And now the picture you have on your website, like Minnesotans, they're not as blingy, right? Generally speaking, I think like it's a more Scandinavian area and stuff, and it's funny, they tend to show their like things in other ways besides this, but if you're in San Antonio, like this probably
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. Or even look at the way her hair is done. Clearly she's like going to a hair place and getting highlights and different things, right? Like that costs a bunch of money to do stuff like that. So it's just these signals of like, and then it's like, well, what kind of people do you work with? Well, we work with wealthy families. Like that's kind of what the signal tells you here. So you just got to think about that of like answering that question of who. Now, I see that there are some pictures like here that answers that question too of like, who's going to come to my house? Like you could see that guy that you just scroll past. He's the guy that's going to come to my house and give me an estimate, right? That guy. It's like, okay, he looks friendly enough and nice, right? Like he looks like he's going to be helpful and not try to like sell me,
Yeah.
right? Do you see how like these pictures make such a big difference in how people, they're not even going to read. How many of you guys, I mean, just use this yourself. Do you think you're going to read through every word right here? If you don't read through it, do you think your customer is going to? I do think 15% of people, I think that's what Caleb and I talk about, are very analytical and they're going to read through every little thing. Thank God for those people because they're the ones that are going to tell you where the spelling errors are and all kinds of things. But the other 85%, they're only going to read the headlines and look at the pictures. And then of those 85%, some of them aren't even going to read the headlines. They're literally just going to look at the pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
So if your website doesn't communicate through just the pictures, you're screwed. And by the way, by the time they get to their website, what we found is they aren't going to click on your videos. So if you look at all the big home service businesses, many of them do not use videos as much on their website. Or if they do, it's more like Caleb's talking about, where someone's really looking to get more information. Like they're trying to dig deep.
Yeah.
But I hate to sort of admit this about painting, but based on what I see on the website, and I love your feedback, Caleb, people don't dig that deep when it comes to painting. Like when we used to have the remodeling company, Caleb, so we owned Haven Builders, built that up to over $10 million, and then we sold that, right? People, when they're looking for remodeling, they'll spend lots of minutes on the website. They'll watch videos. There's all kinds of things. Painting, no. Like they basically just want to get a free quote. Like that's what I found. They don't do, the average person doesn't do that much research.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think if you were like ZK Painting or some of these where they're doing really high-end painting projects, it's probably a bit different, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry. Give me your feedback on some of those ideas.
Yeah, I think even for our mobile and why we see so many conversions just self-schedule, I think it is true that I think most people are ready just to get an estimate and just they're collecting quotes, and it's kind of a culture around painting where it's like, yeah, you just get 3 to 5 quotes, or you just start collecting quotes, and or if you're doing hopefully direct mail and hopefully you're the only quote. But I think there's a different culture around it than there is other exteriors, and we're seeing some of our other pages do well, but they're more topical for painting. So I think
Yeah.
lead paint, like that will do well. Stucco painting, something that's niche, but like if it's, like a lot of people are painting their trim and they've painted their trim like 3 times in the last 15, 20 years, and they kind of know what to expect. They just want their trim painted, and it's like, okay, that's just, it's not a lot going into that, but
Yeah, I think that we've talked about this, and shout out to Hardy. There's two kinds of people that buy painting, people who need it and people who want it,
yeah.
right? And I would say most painting companies focus on the need, and then some focus on the want. But there's also some delineation, like many more people who get exterior painting need painting. So
Mm-hmm.
it's more of a maintenance issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've talked about this before. Your check engine light comes on your car, it's running rough. Like you need to get it to a mechanic, right? And you're not even sure it's going to get you to work tomorrow, right? That's like your paint is peeling on your house and you're thinking water is going to be getting in and wrecking things, and you need to call a painter, right? But if you just want to get fancy wheels on your car, that's totally different, right?
Yeah.
That's just a want. And that group of people, you market different to them.
Yeah.
What are you bringing up here? Kind Homes. Okay. We're going out. We love Kind Homes. They're in our marketing group, right?
Yep. No, I was just looking at their website. Yeah, I think that's what we want to do as a brand with Paris, though, is to move towards like want. I think we haven't. We're seeing certain zip codes, certain markets that are more like it's completely want based. Hence why we've done so well in like lead paint based areas. But yeah, I don't know, just looking at this website, but
Well, why would you want to sell to a want? Because what? They buy more often. They spend it's disposable money. So there's downsides. You're competing with their other disposable money, right? Like they might want new kitchen countertops. They might want all kinds of things at their house. They might want to buy a hot tub. They might want to, you see what I'm saying? That's what you're competing against. But that's a little different than just competing against the other guy that they brought their car to, the other mechanic who gave them a bid, for $850, and you gave them a bid for $750. And from their vantage point, both of them are going to get their check engine light to come off and get their car running straight again.
yeah.
So you're just a commodity at that point. Like that's the one problem I think we all have with. Now I get it. You got to sell, the value, and you guys have all told me all this, and it's great. But at the end of the day, if someone's attitude when they come in is that you're somewhat of a commodity, it's going to be more difficult to sell the value. Whereas if it's a want, I mean, I could tell you, my wife will spend all kinds of money on a purse because what she's buying is the way it makes her feel. Well, different brands do that differently. Now, she's not thinking about how thick the leather is and how long the zippers are going to last, and probably all the things that Caleb, if you and I bought handbags, would be thinking about. But,
Yeah.
and I don't look at, I'm not saying this to demean my wife. The way that that purse makes her feel is important, right? And it's an important part of her day and her life, right? So it's the same thing, though. You can make people feel some way with their painting, but that kind of marketing is very different too, then, right? This is what I like things like Facebook and stuff for much more, is to target the people who want rather than need. I like things like direct mail and stuff much better for the need, because I think the need, it's much more important to position yourself as local and present and trustworthy. And, these are things that I think are indicators for them that the project's not going to go wrong, right? They're like, it sort of goes after all their fears. Facebook, we can create an aesthetic appeal, right? It's like, this is how it's going to make you feel after you paint, your kitchen cabinets or your first floor of your house or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can approach it very differently, right? So I think some tools lend themselves to that. Now, you've got this website. Are you sending certain people to certain parts of the website? How do you approach that?
Well, I was going to mention too, I think we're seeing that we ran a lot of ads on Facebook for the last year or so on stucco painting, and we've had no problem getting volume, but like the SR, the success rate has always been like 25-30%, quite a bit lower. But it feels like the feedback I got from reps, we went through all of the estimates. We had someone call through some of them too, and feedback was kind of like price is too high, and then they just didn't have a need. They just kind of were like window shopping. And I think if you find in your market that there is a want, like, we've talked about this before, like cabinet painting, like that's a big want in certain markets, or front door painting. Like, I think there's a huge faucet that you can open up and you can take advantage of. But I think those people in general, it's a little bit different, and it's a little bit different than me.
So you're making me think of this, because we were just in Las Vegas, and Caleb, you got engaged not that long ago. So we're looking for gifts. I've been married for 25 years. This guy's just getting engaged. And of course, we're both looking for gifts for the woman that we love, right? Just imagine you walk into that fancy handbag. Let's go back to the handbag. And the sales rep, bless her heart, she starts telling you all about the zippers and the leather. And it just doesn't make sense. Like, that's not why you're there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think this is the big difference between some of the painting companies who have success selling that stucco job you just mentioned and don't, is they sort of get that. It's like, they don't go to the estimate and tell them how long that stucco is going to last, that paint job is going to, like, they're not focused on the maintenance side of it. They're focused on like how it's going to make them feel, and they're going to show them all kinds of other pictures of other houses. And it's like, and then maybe even if they did a great job, they have pictures of people who are happy with their new paint job, right? And it's all about positioning how it's going to make them look amongst their neighbors, how it's going to make them feel. Like, when you go into an appointment like that, you sell different. And I know I've heard Eric Foz and others preach about this like ad nauseum, and shout out to you guys. Like, I agree completely. Like, usually when people have lower success rates in these areas, it's because of the sales team. They're not dynamic enough to switch between those modes, right? Yeah. And so then they go in and they just try to tell them about the zipper and the leather quality, and it's just like, well, that works great with someone who needs maintenance on their house, right? And they're looking for value that way. But when we think about value for someone who wants painting, it's actually very different. It's about how it's going to make them feel. It's about how their neighbors are going to think about it. And it's about, like, showing them another house down the street, and maybe creating a little bit of, what's that word? Like envy, and like, this is all part of your plan, basically, if you're selling to wants, right?
Yeah.
And you start talking about how that bag is going to make her shoes look so good, and blank, blank, blank. And I've been there when these gals do this at the place, and my wife is all in on it then. It's like, okay, like this is the bag I want. Like this is going to be great. I'm going to wear it. So they start talking about how it's going to be when they wear it at the Christmas thing. And you see what I'm saying? Like you start talking about how the cabinets are going to be when everybody comes over for Thanksgiving, and it's different, the way that you sell it and talk about it. Oh
Yeah, because the desire has to outweigh the price a bit, and it's like I think some of the problem what happens with the marketing to sales handoff, like you mentioned, is we have a Facebook ad that's like paint your stucco, and it's like an ugly, just a typical beige, or like the stucco is like older, it's kind of brown, it's
or cream. I feel like
cream.
Some kind of warm light color.
Yeah, it's just kind of outdated, and then they convert on the Facebook ad, and they're kind of getting excited because they're like, oh man, my house could look better. The sales rep gets there, he's talking about elastomeric paint and why it's going to hold up, and he's talking about, and he doesn't talk about colors, he doesn't show any examples of stucco painting. It's a big dissonance, and that makes sense why the success rate is so far off. And I remember that a lot of them were asking me like, and this is probably my fault, but a lot of them were asking me like, can you send a stucco example to this person? We had a magazine built this year, but it wasn't stucco specific. It only had like 2 in it. But I'm thinking that I need to build a stucco magazine for next year, so the rep, they're like selling off the magazine.
Make it easier.
Like, these are the transformations. These are like, this is what you're buying. It's not, 2 coats of elastomeric paint with,
Right. And I think, part of this is the marketing job too, is how far can we bring them into the sales process before the sales rep even gets there? Because we could bring them far enough. I mean, shout out to ZK. He talks about this all the time. It's like by the time he gets there, they're already sold on him, right? Like, yes, exactly. You're like, that's basically your marketing, bringing someone further into the journey. So as a team, we have to take responsibility for this too. It's like, well, how do we, because I think that's a harder problem to solve, of like how you bring someone who wants painting further into the journey.
Yeah.
I know James Hardy, they build different landing pages, for these 2 different use cases, and they build completely different, right? We went through this last year when we were at the one conference, where it's just like, they treat these almost like they have completely different products and services, even though they're the exact same, of like people who want party board compared to people who need party board, right? Like, and they basically build completely different websites and everything to try to funnel people into those 2 different ways. Can little $1 million painting companies even do that? I mean, I know that I'm literally not asking a rhetorical question. I have no idea if that's really even possible for us to be thinking like that.
I think what's worked is like for Edina, like most of our in 55436, like those homes don't need painting per se, like they'd be fine without it, but we really popped off in that zip code, and we had a gray to a white, just an outdated color to a new color. And I think that market, like obviously if we would have did lead paint, carpentry, maintenance, it's like none of them really need maintenance. Like they're fine. Right. They're pretty nice. They're pretty new, but that worked really well for us in that market. So I think you could tailor it to a little bit broader of like the zip code or the market. Whereas the most successful campaign we had was historic house painters in the Twin Cities. And that just made sense because most of them are, it's just a need overall.
Maintenance, right.
And I think if you could probably look at the age of home, and you should just go out there and get in the field and kind of look at what you're even marketing.
So you're talking about postcards, and Paris is really good at direct mail. I mean, shout out. It was so great to be able to sit in your monthly kickoff at Paris last night. I know you got a big award, and that was part of the reason why I was there. But not only that was obviously fun, but to hear a couple of the sales reps talk about, when I go to, and they were basically saying this is common, that I get there and they're talking about the ads, right? Like, wow, I really called you because of your postcard. I've called you because I've gotten 5 postcards from you, and I can't believe how good they are. Like, I can't imagine very many painting companies have that kind of testimony. But the reason Caleb's getting that from the sales team is because he's working so hard to make sure that the postcards he sends out throughout the year go to homes, and they're very curated for that specific neighborhood or that specific kind of house. And so it's like you're building a marketing piece just for that person. And the sales reps are giving the feedback like, yeah, we're hearing that all the time. People can't believe, you know, I think what you're saying, Caleb, and I kind of, this is the way I would say it is, well, it's a little harder to do that in the digital world. In some ways it's easier, right? Because building a web page in some ways is easier than building a postcard and stuff. But in many ways it's much more difficult because creating this kind of content on the internet for very varying amounts of volume, I think that's the problem we usually have, is that generally speaking, we can't control where people go as easily as you can with a postcard.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I've struggled with this year is like, do we as a brand keep on going into like historic house painting in general, which I think that's what we need to do. But then there's also like, there's plenty of markets where we're not painting historic homes. And it's like, how do we navigate that? Because like our Google business, it's not like I guess you could make another Google business, but we don't really want to make another Google business for historic painting and then one for, and plus people would navigate to the wrong one anyways. But trying to think through like, how can I funnel people or get them in the right channel? Because I don't necessarily want people in Edina to see, well, at least the newer side, the west side, I don't necessarily want them to see like historic house painters. I want them to see like lake home painters, or like we're updating, we're like big color transformations, like modernizing. I don't really want them to see like a 120-year-old home where it's like we're scraping lead paint. It's like, okay, I don't know, that doesn't seem.
So are you guys hearing what Caleb's saying? Maybe you're even missing it, but I'm going to help you. What he's saying is that if your message doesn't connect with their perception of themselves and or their homes, it's going to have the exact opposite effect of what you intend, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, to be more practical, Caleb, I see that a lot when people send me samples and stuff, is they will do like discounts and stuff on their postcards or on their different ads that they're running, whether it's Facebook or whatever, but that's not the kind of company they are. And that's also not the kind of people they sell to. Yeah. So you've almost like immediately done exactly what you said very practically, where you created this mismatch. And then as soon as people have any kind of level of confusion or non-connection, what are they doing with your ad? They're scrolling past it. They're throwing it away. So you have to work hard to make sure that you're connecting with them. Like, this is for you. Like, they need to feel like that. And that's what you're basically doing in practice right now. The way you're talking about this is like, I'm being very careful to make sure that I'm connecting with them. And I know what doesn't look like. And so I'm avoiding very specific messaging. I don't want their house to look old. He's talking, Edina is a very wealthy part of Minneapolis, so that's what he's talking about right now. And for those of you who have no idea where Edina is, it's one of the wealthiest suburbs of Minneapolis.
Yeah. Yeah, and like even the mailers and the flyers, I think, like you said, it's easier to control, but like even we switched the homeowners, like which ones we're featuring, like a suburban family, like we don't have as many of those photos, so we don't do as many of those projects. But like overall, I want, and our largest audience is active grandparents in the cities, and we're actually seeing that in the suburbs. It's more like people 36 to 50, and they're more like, I think McMansions and private schools. That group.
Shout out to you guys who do Sociometrics. That's what he's talking about right now.
Yeah.
And we don't use it necessarily. We're not doing like list targeting with Sociometrics that much, right, Caleb? But we do use it to inform what kind of pictures and the way that we're doing it. Hence, when you go to parispainting.com, the website, you're seeing that couple could be grandparents, right? Your main picture that you're using right now.
They're kind of in between, yeah.
Yep, and they definitely look like they're in the city. So, I mean, hats off. You've got your sociometric like pegged perfectly there as far as I'm concerned. But we ran all those sociometrics on, our one list and on very specific zip codes, right, to see kind of what they're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that's what helped our mail immediately this year is just featuring a lot of like grandparents on the postcards, and just like, like door knocking really informed those decisions too of like, all of our customers, most of our customers are pretty old, so they see someone like that looks exactly like me, and that looks like my home, that looks like everything, like pretty easy
Bingo.
to build trust. So
Yeah, exactly. One little thing that I would love to talk about that I would
yeah,
love for painters to do in the off season is really like have a heart to heart with themselves about their logo, about their look.
yeah,
I feel like, we just came back from this conference where the average company size is 30 million to 300 million, right? Kind of more of that size range.
hmm
And they seem to care a lot about this. I could tell by the way they talk about it, by the way that they're making their websites and their vans.
yeah,
But I also realize that they're spending, a lot of times $30 to $50,000 with companies like KickCharge and others to really go for like a brand overhaul, right? Where they redo their logo, they redo their wraps, they redo everything, all their apparel, all of their handouts. Like they do it all at once. It's got a very defined color palette that they start with. And shout out to many of our partners too, who really like they want this. I think many of you painters, you want this, but then when we start talking about $30 to $50,000,
yeah, it's hard.
I was like, oh, I want a Bentley too, but then it's like I don't know, I don't got Bentley money. Um, it's like, well, what steps do you think the average painter could take? Because I know, like Paris, we were sort of blessed because we have people like Chet and Jason Paris here. You guys might not believe this because Jason like kind of dresses very hokey and he's like, but he actually has a very good eye for aesthetics. And Chet definitely does too. We sort of take this for granted a little bit because our founders, I think, like pointed our brand in the right direction over this first
Yeah,
several years in a very healthy way that most painters honestly don't have. Like
hmm
most of you guys do not have great logos, great, color palettes, things like this. And you also don't have $40,000 to go spend on a fancy marketing agency to help you with it.
yeah,
Um, I was like, well, what could they do like to sort of bridge that gap where it's like, well, I still want to have a brand like Wise Coatings, right? You guys familiar with him, Brandon Vaughn? Shout out to Brandon if you're watching this, man. Um, I think he did use KickCharge, right, to do the Wise Coatings. Here, you want to bring up the Wise Coatings website so that people can get caught up with that. Um, and of course, like KickCharge, they love doing these sort of character
mm,
type logos, and Wise has like it's a very elephant oriented, right? But everything works together. So what we start with is a logo that can be used in a bunch of different ways. You could see it could be just the elephant. It could be the elephant with Wise Coatings. It could be bigger. And then we move on to a color palette that's complementary to the logo. And then we work on what is your most important aspect of your brand. If you're a home service business, this is probably your truck. I know that sounds crazy, but it really is. And so we're thinking a lot about how we're going to wrap the vehicle and how it's going to stand out. So why would you care about this? Well, when you pull up, when they get your email, they go to your website, you pull up in the truck, they see your, everything that you're wearing, right? They see your materials that you hand them during the estimate. All these things work
yeah,
together, your advertisements. In the back of their mind, they're like, oh, this company knows what the heck they're doing. They're very professional. And in the back of their mind, they're thinking like, well, they're probably going to cost more. And they will very likely even pay you more than a company that doesn't have all this. It's almost like you get a 10% spiff in the equation because they will probably feel a little bit more comfortable with you because it's like, well, clearly this company knows what the heck they're doing, right?
yeah,
And so it's like you just built 10% margin. This is the way I would argue it. You built 10% margin into the equation immediately. Okay, so you're a $1 million company. That's $100,000. Now I get it. You guys probably are already thinking, Nate, you're trying to sell me this $40,000 package. I get it. Well, I'm not. I don't sell anything like that, so don't worry. But I don't think it's so crazy, even for a $5 million. Maybe $1 million. It's hard, but I'm saying like even a $3 to $5 million company, I don't think it's that crazy to spend this kind of money to rebrand and to really get something like Wise did, where it's like, this is clearly memorable. It clearly positions you as a more professional company,
yeah.
right?
Well, I think it goes along the lines of your logo, your name, and everything should be a mental shortcut. It should make it easier, the path easier to remember. think this isn't I like that some of these home service brands are doing some of these cool things, but the one thing I kind of noticed is they kind of start to look similar to me. But
Yes.
that's maybe
Well,
because I'm a marketer.
Kickcharge has that problem. Here, pull up. If you go to Kickcharge's, here, let me see if I can drop this into your show notes here. I think I can.
Their website or
Yeah, here. Oh, here's my chat. Here, I'm just gonna. Because if you go to use this tool right here, I dropped it in though. There's that tool. Yeah, this one. Okay, if you guys go to Kickcharge's portfolio, see that little box, the keyword search. So you could look up painters. You could look up. Let's say you were like, whatever you could think of. Like you wanted to think, okay, so here's the painters. The shout out to a couple of you guys who told me, hey, wait a second, Kickcharge designed mine, and how come I'm not on this list? I don't know why they're picking certain ones and not others. Yeah, I don't know. Don't ask me that. But if you do use that tool, you could go and like if you wanted to see all the ones that were, there's all kinds of different words you could type in to kind of get a feel for it. It's like, smooth or swift or, there's all kinds of different sort of, codings. Yeah, like you're on the right track is like, what are they going to show? And we already know that they don't have all of them on here. Yeah, fast. I wonder if they're going to have any like that. Yeah, fast pro, fast air. How about neighborhood? Do they have any that went in that direction? Or it's kind of a long word, so I wouldn't think that there would be very many that would try that. The neighborhood electrician. There you go. Yeah, I agree with you though, Caleb. What happens is that they start having a lot of logos that start kind of feeling the same.
Yeah. Well, I think the only thing is, or the one thing is too that I know I got feedback on the Paris logo. I won't mention who, but that like it's not bright enough. The gray is too dark and it's hard to read, or too light and hard to read. And I get that totally.
Yeah.
But I think what people need to understand, why our mailers are so successful, is that we make our brand like the PS, like the postscript, like not the focus of it. We focus on the neighborhood first, and Paris is the second. So every single mailer we do does not have Paris painting in the headline. We don't do that because we're not the hero. No one cares about us. Like I've already come to the conclusion that no one even cares about painting companies. They only care about like themselves and their home. After a year of door knocking, I can confirm that that's true. But I think I don't know how to navigate that, but I know that the hero, like who is the hero of the story, and it's like, okay, well, it's not. These guys aren't the hero. I mean, it's really the homeowner always. But
yeah, so for those of you guys who've read StoryBrand, Caleb is basically talking about StoryBrand. Strongly recommend reading the book by Donald Miller. That's all the concepts that Caleb's talking about right now are right out of that book. And Caleb, have you taken any of the StoryBrand courses?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, it's worthwhile. I think it used to be about $500, but I think that is a worthwhile investment to take the courses to. And you will know, you will be thinking exactly like Caleb is right now, which is no one cares about your brand. You need to make the customer the hero. All these concepts are right out of StoryBrand. So if you're interested in going down that rabbit trail, that's a good one to go down, right?
Yeah, I even want to revisit that because like that's a good way to build your website. And I think some of these brands are they're cool and they're slick, but we don't.
I actually like the StoryBrand framework much better than the They Ask You Answer framework. They both are amazing. The problem I have with They Ask You Answer is it tends to lend itself, in my opinion, a little bit more to the analytical mind, which I think is only like 15% of buyers. So to me, if you literally take the They Ask You Answer framework super seriously, I think you're actually missing out on a huge portion of the people who are going to buy from you. And I think that's what I'm much more attracted to the StoryBrand framework is I think it focuses a lot more on the emotional elements of the equation, which is how we all buy. And we all want to see ourselves. Don't lie. When you guys look at those photo albums, the first picture you see is of yourself, right? Like we just can't help it as humans. And it's the same with all ads. We want to see ourselves in a sense, right? Like what you said earlier, Caleb, was so brilliant. Like I want a picture of the people that look just like them in front of a house that's just like theirs. It's just the same thing, right? But that's the thing I don't like about the they ask you answer.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. They ask you answer. I think that's the framework. Hopefully I'm saying it right, but it's amazing framework as well. It's just, I put a lot of asterisks next to it in my mind. So
Yeah, because I think this story brand talks more about the barrier or like the like what are they afraid? Yeah, their fears, because the fears
yep,
is the most important thing. And if we even went back to Southwest Exteriors, I do like that they were like the enemy. They make the enemy pretty clear. Like no one wants to be blindsided by low quality workmanship. No one wants to have to repaint their house again. No one wants to wait a month to get their house painted, and the painter keeps. And I think that's why like dedicated project manager has been a really good bullet point for us this year. We
yeah,
use that almost everything, and we get a lot of feedback on that particular, because that's kind of functions as the guide of their story. It's like, well, you're
sure.
gonna have a dedicated project manager, like they're gonna be with you throughout the whole process, and I think expanding that out would be good for a lot of painting companies.
Yeah, that's great. Well, maybe we should wrap up here. I think we probably already went around and wandered a little bit. Hopefully, it's still helpful today. If you guys want to have further questions about your brand or about things, we don't sell anything here, but if you're just willing, wanting to talk to us a little bit, feel free to reach out to us. Most of you guys know how to get a hold of us. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add, Caleb?
No, I mean, like we were talking about, I think this is a good time of the year to just revisit your brand, your website, like anything that you wanna, your call software. I think it's a good time of the year to look at these things. And if you also have people that you recommend or that have done a good job on stuff like this, you should mention them in the comments. And
Yeah, I amen to that. Like, I would particularly love if you guys thought you knew of a vendor who could do kick charge level quality, but
yeah,
really was more in that $10,000 to $20,000 range. I am extremely interested in that because to me, this is a big barrier in our industry for professionalization right now is that we're just not quite there to spend that 30, 40,000.
exactly.
But many of you guys are big enough where you need to have brands that look and feel more like these big home service businesses, right?
Yeah.
And I think I could convince more of you to spend 13,000 or something on it. Even if we got 80% of the way there, I think it would be worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Well, cool.
all right. Well, it's great chatting with you again, as always, Caleb.
Yeah. Thanks, Nate. Good conversation. See ya.
Yep.